Hello, I am Matt Williamson. This episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. And got a lot for you today, as I usually do on these day removed from the big game. And we're always going to start with snap counts. I think there's a lot to be learned with snap counts. And the whole starting offensive line played 62 snaps, except for Siamalu. He missed 3. Aaron Rodgers also missed 3. I assume that they just pulled Siamalu out. I'm almost certain. I wasn't paying as much attention. I assume when Rodgers came out in garbage time, they pulled Siamalu out too, just to lighten his load. Calvin Austin out-snapped DK Metcalf 57-56. But it's pretty clear they're the top 2 at this point if you haven't figured that out. Warren got 36 to lead the running backs. Jonnu Smith got 35 to lead the tight ends, followed by Freiermuth. More on that stuff later with 31. Gainwell with 26. That's too many snaps for Kenneth Gainwell. I know you don't have a lot of options right now, but we've been talking about a lot of my Steelers shows. I think whether you like it or not, or he can handle it or not, you might need to bump up Warren stuff because Gainwell's playing too much and Johnson sure isn't ready. Darnell Washington chips in with 23. Roman Wilson got a big bump from 10 last week to 22 this game. Turned into a little bit more 3 wide, and I think he established himself as your third wide receiver. And these guys were all under 10. Hayward 9, Miller 9, Spencer Anderson 4, Rudolph 3, blah, blah, blah. Skowronek 3, and Caleb Johnson only 2. I mean, it says a lot where you're at in the running game. And your third-round rookie is only playing 2 snaps, basically back-to-back games. Now, it's not time to write the story on him totally yet, but the kickoff thing wasn't great either. But that is disheartening. All right, let's go to defense here. Thornhill, Ramsey, Slay played all 65 snaps. Not real out of the ordinary. Patrick Queen played 60. Chuck Clark played 57. Probably a lot more than you want Chuck Clark to play, to be very honest. Peyton Wilson, 56. Herbig, 51. 50 for Watt. 48 for Hayward. 47 for Benton. It's a lot for those guys. I mean, you're asking a lot from both those dudes, and neither one's playing very well. Y.A. Black, 40. Sawyer, 26. We know why, but that's too many for him as well. Eccles, 23. Ukele, 20. I'm kind of a Ukele fan. I don't think he was great in this game, but he can stop the run and he can play the nose. That might be all I need from, at this point. Holcomb, 13. Logan Lee, 12. Highsmith only lasted 10 snaps. Ouch. And who knows how long that's going to be. Loudermilk only lasted 6, which that part doesn't break my heart. Little Birdie told me, and we'll see more about this, but most people seem to think the Loudermilk high ankle sprain is worse than the Highsmith high ankle sprain. I can't confirm that. I'm not a doctor. I wasn't at the facility, but some people kind of alluded to me that that's the case. And Carson Bruner chipped in with 1 play. Okay. Football season is finally here. Time to check out the latest odds, futures, and win totals on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Think the Steelers are headed to the Super Bowl? I don't at the moment, but hey, lock in your bets today. Whatever your game, FanDuel Sportsbook delivers the latest lines, futures, and specials so you can join in on all the action.
Hey guys, if you're planning to see a Steelers game, use the Game Time app to get your tickets. You can snag new ticket deals before anyone if you set it into your app alerts. The app is easy to use. No surprise fees at checkout. You can see your seat view before buying, and you're getting legit tickets delivered on time. If you're not much of a planner, you can get last-minute deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. Lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app and enter the code DK Steelers into your app profile to get $20 off your first purchase.
All right, I told you we would dig into some of this usage in the running back situation. In the first week, it was pretty clear what their roles were. Warren was last year's Najee. Gainwell was last year's Warren. Okay, obviously both are smaller than their guy before them and less physical. But this week, Warren was the lead back. And it's a little bit harder to figure out when they were. They were a little more interchangeably, just when the mood hit them, maybe when the running back coach decided to put him in. It wasn't as obvious in terms of roles. But Warren was pretty much the primary third down back. And, you know, it was more the feature back all around. You know what I mean? But both running backs did play multiple snaps on just about every drive. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But I would imagine you got to give more and more to Warren and kind of hope for the best in terms of staying healthy and being able to withstand that pounding. Because I like Gainwell, but he's a satellite guy. It's pretty clear Ramon Wilson is the third receiver, as we mentioned. In week 1, Wilson and Skoranek basically were 50-50 as the third wideout. But when they were in 11 personnel this week, Wilson was out there 82% of the snaps, which is pretty much all you need to know. But still, that only means he was out there for 35% of the snaps in general because the Steelers play so many non-3 receiver sets, multiple tight ends. Speaking of tight ends, Jonnu played 56.5% of the offensive snaps this week. It was about 10% higher than that a week ago. And their usage of Freiermuth's always been odd to me. But he was the clear third down tight end this week. Didn't know there was such a thing, but I think that's how they're viewing him. And again, their usage, there's a lot of times in 12 last year that he wasn't out there, but he was out there for all the third down stuff. Now, some other just takeaways from the game and things we've been talking about throughout the day and observations. First off, as I like to do, you got to tip your hat to the opponents at times. And I thought JSN was really, really good. I thought Darnold played a pretty good game, but I thought Kenneth Walker was awesome. I really did. I thought, wow, is he explosive? Is he tough to tackle? I loved him coming out of Michigan State. I've loved him with Seattle. I targeted him in all my fantasy leagues. He was awesome. And kind of like Breece Hall, and we were talking about this on a different show, everything that the Steelers have had to get in the running game from running backs has not been through gaping holes. And when Warren does have space, he's looked really good. But these guys, Hall and Walker, not only do that when they're in space, but they've run through some huge holes against Steelers D. Speaking of Warren, who else? I wrote this question to myself, who else shined on offense other than Warren? I think you could say Rodgers in that he didn't have good protection. He didn't have a running game. And he also didn't have receivers getting open. Doesn't leave much, so he basically had no help. Now, he wasn't great. I thought he was better in week 1 than week 2. But he didn't have any help in any of those facets. That's important. My man Fatanu, who I'm really high on, but really hasn't played a lot of football, I thought he had a pretty rough game, a real rough game. And some of the defensive players for Seattle really stood out across their defensive front. Hall, Mafe, Murphy, the first-round pick from a year ago. I told you it's a really, really good and deep front that has 8 or 9 legit dudes. And that definitely stood out. But defensive lines are better than offensive lines across the league. You got to figure out things to combat that. I thought Thornhill had a really rough game. Very little middle of the field presence, and Seattle kept attacking the middle of the field. And I also thought they did a really poor job of helping Ramsey when he was, quote, on an island and didn't get much support from coverage people around him. You could tell he was frustrated by that, and I think a lot of that was Thornhill. Not great. I think I mentioned this yesterday, but if I didn't, we have to definitely harp on it. It is crazy how much teams are just running away from Watt. They're just running to the offense's left over and over and over. And that's okay when Highsmith's at his best, which he didn't get a lot of snaps out of him. We talked about that. Or when Cam's at his best, but neither is true at the moment. And they're having a lot of success going left. And why wouldn't New England do the exact same thing? And running at Watt makes no sense because he is a stud setting the edge against the run. I mentioned Ukele. I'd love to see more of him. I'd love to see more Benton at defensive end. I'd love to see Black cross-trained a little bit at nose, but Ukele to me needs to play more. That was a positive, I suppose. So here's some numbers stuff, as you know, I like to dig up and talk about, but late downs, third and fourth down, mostly third. Obviously, they didn't go for very much. Seattle's offensive success rate on late downs was really, really good. And you could feel it in this game. You got him in third and long. Okay, got him right where you want him. They get 10 on a 3rd and 9, over and over. So success rate on third downs is just, did you get it or not? So they did a lot of things successfully on late downs, which is backbreaking. Now, I mentioned how good Walker was in this game. That I know sometimes EPA is not your guys' favorite thing, but he was, per EPA leading into the Monday night games, the most successful back in the whole league in week 1. Not great for the Steelers. He averaged 8.1 yards a carry. 8.1. Steelers have allowed 299 rushing yards in 2 games. Now, I mentioned the middle of the field passing rate. So 49% of the Seattle pass attempts went between the numbers. That's extremely high, folks. That's extremely high. I mean, there's a lot more field to the left and right than between the numbers. And that was in the 100th percentile in terms of the rest of the league. Like, that's about as high as you're going to see. Needs to be corrected, man. That's rough. So here's something that I hope makes you feel better. And I don't think I'm straining on this. But for this game with Elliott and Porter out, their top 6 defensive backs, I know Peppers didn't play, but their top 3 safeties going into this game would be Peppers, Clark, Thornhill. Okay. Maybe I'm stretching a little on Peppers considering he was not a contributor. But their top 3 corners, Eccles, Ramsey, Slay. So if we can concede that definitely the top 5 defensive backs, if not the top 6 in terms of value, are those names I just mentioned. Well, what do they all have in common? None of them were Pittsburgh Steelers last year. None of them played together last year. That's not an excuse. But secondary, much like O-line, is a very communicative position. When do I pass them off to my buddy? Different coverages, when does zone turn into man? All those type of things. So I'm not excusing it. It's kind of like all the defensive injuries. I'm just telling you facts. The Steelers have had a lot of defensive injuries, and their top 5 or 6, basically every defensive back that played yesterday, are all new. So let's not forget that, okay? Speaking of success rate, this is what worries me, is because, yeah, the offense makes the plays. Rodgers finds people downfield, Metcalf, nice touchdown, etc. But the Steelers' offensive success rate was only 34%. And what that means is only really 1 out of 3 plays are deemed successful. And how bad that is, that's in the 9th percentile of the league. As mentioned, like with the middle of the field stuff, 100th percentile is the best, 0th percentile is the worst. You're in the 9th percentile with offensive success rate. Just most things you did weren't successful at a very wide margin. One thing that might shock you, And this is very different from a year ago, though. I mentioned that middle of the field passing rate. Well, the Steelers threw 26% of their passes in the middle of the field, which is in the 76th or 72nd percentile. So to show how crazy it is what Seattle did, if 26% gets you a 72 out of 100, they were at 49% and got them in the 100th percentile. So there's a lot of middle of the field passing in this, which when the Steelers have played lately has been true when they're on defense. People attack the Steelers in the middle of the field, but has not been true, as you know, on offense. Last thing I have for you, they only have one run play this year that have gone for 10 or more yards. So as mentioned, the successful plays, low, but getting no explosive runs yet again. And you're not going to get them from Rodgers. And I think the running back dilemma, I'm a Warren fan, is kind of precarious right now. How would you handle running back touches and workload? It's not easy with where Johnson's at. All right, everybody, take care. Over and out.